If you see any of these guys in prison, you're probably gonna have a bad day. I'm your host Yusuf, and these are the top 10 most feared men in prison. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and ring that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, let's look into it. Number 10. Pascal Payet. Let's count up the things he's done to get himself into French prison. His original sentence was 30 years for an execution in 1997. Next, he got 6 years for a jailbreak in 2001, and then 7 years for organizing a 2003 jailbreak, another 5 years for a jailbreak in 2007, and finally, 15 years for armed robberies and assaults on police while an escaped prisoner in 2007. All of those crimes give him a grand total of 63 years. By July 2007, Payet was one of the most closely surveyed prisoners in France and was never kept at the same prison for more than 6 months. He had been officially classified as a prisoner under especially high surveillance and placed in solitary confinement. Despite these measures, on July 14, 2007, taking advantage of Bastille Day celebrations, 4 masked men hijacked a helicopter from Cannes' Mandelieu Airport. They used it to free Payet from his solitary confinement in a prison in Grasse. Number 9. Alfred George Hines. Hines was an amazing escape artist. He escaped from Nottingham prison after sneaking through the locked doors and over a 20-foot prison wall, for which he became known in the press as Houdini Hines. He worked as a builder-decorator in Ireland and throughout Europe until his arrest by detectives of Scotland Yard in 1956 after 248 days as a fugitive. After his arrest, Hines brought a lawsuit against authorities charging the prison commissioners with illegal arrest and used the incident as a means to plan his next escape by having a padlock smuggled into him while at the law courts. 2 guards escorted him to the toilet, but when they removed his handcuffs, Hines bundled the men into the cubicle and snapped the padlock onto screw eyes that his accomplices had earlier fixed to the door. He escaped into the crowd on Fleet Street, but was captured at an airport 5 hours later. Hines would make his 3rd escape from Chelmsford prison less than a year later. He then returned to Ireland, where he lived for 2 years as a used car dealer under the name William Herpert Bishop, before his arrest after being stopped in an unregistered car. Number 8. Jack Sheppard. Jack Sheppard is perhaps the most celebrated criminal in England's history. He was originally arrested in 1724 after thieving and burglary. The man then went on to escape 4 times from prison, each time in an extravagant manner and being reported on heavily. Sheppard was as known for his attempts to escape from prison as he was for his crimes. An autobiographical narrative, thought to have been ghostwritten by Daniel Defoe, was sold at his execution, quickly followed by popular plays. The characters of Macheath in John Gay's The Beggar's Opera in 1728 was based on Sheppard, keeping him in the limelight for over 100 years. He returned to the public consciousness around 1840, when William Harrison Ainsworth wrote a novel entitled Jack Sheppard, with illustrations by George Cruikshank. The popularity of his tale and the fear that others would be drawn to emulate his behavior led the authorities to refuse to license any plays in London with Jack Sheppard in the title for 40 years. Number 7. Frank Lee Morris. Frank Morris was born in Washington, D.C. His parents abandoned him when he was 11, so he spent the rest of his childhood in foster homes, an orphan. He was convicted of his first criminal offense at 13, and by his late teens had been arrested for crimes ranging from narcotics possession to armed robbery. He spent most of his early years in jail serving lunch to prisoners. Later, he was arrested for grand larceny in Miami Beach, car theft, and armed robbery. Morris reportedly ranked in the top 2% of the general population in intelligence, as measured by IQ testing. He had an IQ of 133. He served time in Florida and Georgia, that escaped from the Louisiana State Penitentiary while serving 10 years for bank robbery. He was recaptured a year later while committing a burglary and sent to Alcatraz on January 20th, 1960 as inmate number AZ-1441. He was a part of the infamous 5-person crew who managed to escape Alcatraz. The crew used a raft made of raincoats and fake heads they'd sculpted during their time there to trick the guards. Number 6. Richard Lee McNair. McNair was sent to prison for a robbery gone wrong, ending in the execution of a man and another man being shot 4 times. He has escaped multiple times from several prisons, but managed to dissuade police from sending him to a maximum security prison because it would be too far for his parents for them to visit. He then acquired a job at the prison fixing mailbags. After several months, McNair designed a way to leave the prison by hiding in a pallet of mailbags he'd fixed, and that was shrink wrap. He waited for a forklift to deliver him to a truck, which drove him an hour and 15 minutes away from the prison, where he cut himself out and began jogging off. Hours after escape from Pollock, McNair was stopped by police officer Carl Bordelon. McNair had no identification and proceeded to give Officer Bordelon the alias of Robert Jones. When asked again 5 minutes later, he gave a different alias, Jimmy Jones. though the officer did not notice the different answer. McNair laughed and joked with the officer, and even as the officer got a matching description of the inmate, McNair appeared collected and calm. He successfully convinced Bordelon that he was jogging and in town to help on a post-Katrina roofing project, allowing him to go back to jogging within 10 minutes. Number 5. J. Jr. Sigler and his loyal family and friends. In his 8th year of a 20-year jail sentence, J. Jr. Sigler, an inmate charged with armed robbery at the infamous Everglades Correctional Institution, decided to plan a prison escape strategy that saw him escape from prison with the help of his mother, Sandra Sigler, and a few of his friends. He escaped in broad daylight when 3 of his friends rammed an 18-wheeled truck through 4 prison fences, followed by a car driven by his mother. After escaping successfully, Jay and his friends swapped vehicles at a local mall. Jay was executed in an attempt to flee after realizing that they were being followed. The car he was driving slammed into an oncoming vehicle, resulting in his passing. Number 4. Antonio Ferrara. Ferrara, 35, who emigrated to France with his family in the 1980s, was in Fresnes prison in Val-de-Marne, having been jailed for bank robbery. He escaped when a gang set fire to cars in the local area to create a diversion, before raking the guard posts with automatic rifles and smashing down the door and interior walls with rocket launchers. They gave Ferrara explosives that allowed him to blow off the bars of his cell. He had previously arranged to commit a minor act of disobedience so as to be placed in a punishment wing, which was well located for the escape. It took 3 days of deliberations for the verdict to be pronounced at the Cour d'Assises de Paris after a 10-week trial. In total, 18 accomplices were sentenced, while 2 suspects were acquitted. Punishments ranged from suspended sentences to a variety of jail terms, including 4 of 15 years each. The men were convicted of crimes including aiding and abetting escape, destroying goods with explosives, burning cars, and transporting weapons. Number 3. Stephen J. Russell. Stephen J. Russell is an American con artist, known for escaping from prison multiple times. On March 20th, 1998, Russell posed as a millionaire from Virginia in an attempt to legitimize a $75,000 loan from Nations Bank in Dallas. When bank officials became suspicious and alerted the police, Russell feigned a heart attack and was transported to the hospital. Russell was placed on security watch, but he impersonated an FBI agent and called the hospital on his cell phone to tell them he could be released. U.S. Marshals later tracked down Russell in Florida, where they arrested him on April 5th, 1998, when he went to retrieve the facts. Russell was sentenced to a total of 144 years in prison, 99 years for the escapes, and 45 years for subsequent scams. Number 2. Jason Barnum. The eyeball man, Jason Barnum, was sentenced to 22 years in prison for shooting an Alaska police officer. Barnum's offenses were driven by a serious substance addiction, reports The Independent. What made him even more dangerous and intimidating was his tattoo-filled visage. Barnum had one of his eyeballs completely tattooed. The shooting happened when police were investigating home burglaries and car thefts. Officers were inspecting a hotel in 2012 when Barnum opened fire from a bathroom. 2 officers shot back, striking Barnum in the arm, and 1 officer was injured. Barnum later admitted to committing thefts and burglaries to feed a substance addiction. Number 1. Thomas Silverstein. Thomas Edward Silverstein was an American criminal who spent the last 42 years of his life in prison after being convicted of 4 separate executions while imprisoned for armed robbery, one of which was overturned. Silverstein spent the last 36 years of his life in solitary confinement for executing corrections officer Merle Klutz at the Marion Penitentiary in Illinois. Prison authorities described him as a brutal executioner and a former leader of the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang. Silverstein maintained that the dehumanizing conditions inside the prison system contributed to the 3 executions he committed. He was held in a specially designed cell in what is called Range 13 at ADX Florence Federal Penitentiary in Colorado. He was the longest held prisoner in solitary confinement within the Bureau of Prisons at the time of his passing. Many prison guards refused to talk to Silverstein out of respect for Klutz. Thanks for watching, like the video and leave a comment if you found this video interesting, and we'll see you next time.